Hi, I am Julie Meyerowitz of hearmywordsautism.com. I am an autism coach for parents of children on the spectrum and independent adults who are autistic. And I am here with Melanie Keiling. I'm very excited. And I'm going to let Melanie introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Melanie Keiling, or otherwise known as Autistic Grandma. I run a blog of about 17,000 people who I'm just like their grandma, and I give advice on self-care, on how to heal from trauma, and it's just become my mission to help as many autistic people and parents of autistic children as I can. So
And I appreciate that because we've only known each other for like a few weeks at this point, and I already feel like you're like my autism grandma.
yeah, see, and that's what I get. That's how I get a lot of people.
Yeah. I don't think you're that much older than me, but I feel like I've already come to you asking for advice, and I think there was tea and coffee involved. So
Yes, there was. For sure, right?
okay, so Melanie, share with us, what is your relationship to autism?
Well, I have a lot of family members who are either diagnosed, undiagnosed, neurodivergent
Right.
in numerous ways with lots of comorbids. So I grew up, my mother was a late diagnosed autistic. Of course, we didn't know that back in the 70s.
You say when she was diagnosed, this is incredible. Yeah.
We're talking like she was 70 plus years old when she was finally diagnosed.
Right.
But she was a trauma. She had lots of trauma as a child. And so then I came along and I was hell on wheels, you know, and it was a nightmare growing up as neurodivergent in the 70s and 80s because there was nothing, especially for women.
I was going to say for girls, because girls aren't allowed to be neurodivergent.
No, we're not.
Boy thing.
And so then I started having children,
Oh.
and one by one I started getting diagnosis and finding out that all my children are on the spectrum.
How many children?
Four.
Wow.
And so it's just been that's been my life, my whole life, really. But until I started raising children on the spectrum, it didn't really register what was going on, you know, because there was nothing for us back then.
What you remember that existed that you're now thinking of autism? What did they call it then? Like
Bipolar disorder.
bipolar disorder. Okay.
My mother was diagnosed bipolar. My sisters were diagnosed bipolar. Her mother was diagnosed bipolar. And it wasn't until later, you know, that they realized that no, it's females with autism present differently.
Right. So what were they saying? I'm drawing this out, and I know we have more topics to cover, but what were that they were then calling bipolar disorder that they eventually realized was really autism?
The emotional factor, the over, like, you know, how bipolar, you have your ups, your really highs, and your really lows. Well, that's can be just, it was misunderstood and labeled bipolar disorder when it was really just the emotional roller coaster of being autistic. And I was not diagnosed with anything, and instead I was punished.
Okay.
I was punished, and it didn't work because it didn't help.
Well, it's like this week, I know this is going to air later, but like this week in the group that you joined for me, that we have Hila talking about like when you try and fight something, like the war on whatever, like it fights back. Like,
Exactly. And I use that kind of talk a lot. You know, it's learning to float to the top of the raging river and not fight against the currents, and
down under.
instead of fighting against your children's sensory issues or needs, go with the flow.
Right. That it's hard for a lot of people. Well, I think part of it is because just like we could co-regulate with each other, which is harder to do and to realize, we trigger each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, and then also what you get, the prognosis I was handed for my 18-year-old son was horrific.
can you talk
And
about,
so
yeah, what
he, go ahead. I'm
go ahead,
sorry.
just talk about the
Yeah,
project.
the prognosis was terrible. I took him to a developmental specialist,
Mhm.
and he spent about 15 minutes with my son and told me that my son would never talk, that he would become angry and violent as he reached puberty, and that he would have to be taken away from me and put in a lockdown facility for my own protection.
How old was your son at that age?
3.
At 3. And so next to his DSM, he had a crystal ball, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, but what happened was I had a speech language pathologist who asked me if he could go with, because other parents were being told the same thing and he wanted to hear it,
Wow.
right? And so I took him with me, and the developmental specialist didn't know who he was. I mean, he could have been my boyfriend, right? And so we get outside and I'm crying so hard that I'm almost throwing up. And
Right.
he just tells me, Melanie, you can't listen to that. You can't let that man write the book for your son.
Ooh,
And so I went into a horrible depression. And
yeah.
it wasn't autism. It was just the horrible negative prognosis. Like, why even try?
Mm-hmm.
Why even continue? What's the use? And I think that's where parents get that they feel that overwhelming need to, they have to get them into this therapy and that therapy, and you have to work hard because you only have this much time to
Right.
fix them.
Right.
And that's not the case.
Not true. And it's counterproductive.
Exactly.
Yeah, because like we've talked about so much, like the foundation of everything. What comes
Yeah.
before fixing or teaching or any skill is the self-regulation and the co-regulation.
Yes.
And
Unless you have that, you have nothing.
exactly. Well, I think I was just talking to a family yesterday that like as a professional, and you're in this conversation a lot, what's so common with autism is what we call the Swiss cheese effect. That like if I would, as a speech therapist, eventually I got to the point that if I got a kid who didn't necessarily have an autism diagnosis, but they almost always crossed my path with or without it,
Right.
and I saw like the kid is like a genius and things that are like so many years beyond his grade level and missing
Right.
like basic skills.
Mhm.
That's the Swiss cheese effect, right?
Yeah, is it the 2E kids? They
What's that?
call them now. That I think they call them the 2E kids,
Oh,
where
twice.
they're, yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of times that comes because we're trying to plug in these things, or they have, we'll talk later about like the expert mind. So
Yeah.
they're naturally pursuing things more voraciously than other people. But also when there's not a foundation of regulation, like things, that's where the cracks are that things are falling through.
Right. Right.
So how would you define or describe autism?
I believe it's just part of neurodiversity. And I know a lot of people would argue against that. I've heard, I've never had this conversation with people, but I've heard conversations like, my son can't talk. And how can you say this is just neurodiversity?
Right.
Well, it is. And I think there's enough evidence now that shows it's true. And if people would stop looking at autism as some sort of weakness
Mm.
instead of a strength,
Mm.
and the differences as instead of problems, just the reality of who your child or your loved one is, you can get past that.
Yeah,
But you got to keep an open mind about it.
which is hard, and especially since the reality of a parent or individual living with autism is a large part of that is coming in conflict with the way things are and what expectations are. It's
Right.
hard to be in a place of being open-minded.
Right. I had to. I was flying blind when my oldest son was diagnosed. I had no support. There was no online community.
Right,
I
right.
just went with my gut, you know. I saw him by third grade, he was flipping out so bad at school that he switched his sleep habits so he could sleep during school. He'd be
Mm,
up all night and sleep all day. And so I finally pulled him out and just let him decompress.
mm.
And ever since then, we've been fine.
Wow. So that was working backwards. That's about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And he now can speak. I've
Right.
got some little videos that he let me make on my page, that
Yeah.
adorable stuff.
You post him every once in a while. He's cute.
He is. He's
Yeah.
my love.
Yeah. So the first topic that we wanted to discuss, and I'm very excited that you're here because you know that I have personally an experience that I stepped in something, which is safely engaging in the autism conversation online without
My, yeah, there's a way to do it. What
yeah.
you want to do is, if you enter a group, you want to sit back and watch for a while and read the comments and see how people are engaging. And not every autism group is the same. Some people are very angry, and I believe they have a right to be angry. They've been subjected to abuses over the years, neglect, post-traumatic stress disorders, and they're still fighting in a corner.
Mhm.
And so if you see yourself in a group like that, don't just leave, listen
Mhm.
and hear the words that aren't being said, the
Okay.
pain. I mean, what you see is just like any other behavior. You see the behavior, but what is behind the behavior?
Mhm.
You know, it's the same as people talk about this with children. Well, we used to be children, right?
You still really
And
are.
so you look at these behaviors not as that it's some kind of nasty person having a meltdown. It's a person that is in pain
Right.
and sometimes lashing out is all they have at that moment.
Right. Right.
And that's why I created this nice space where
Yeah.
that doesn't happen.
Yeah. What do you do so that it doesn't happen or to make sure that it's a safe space?
I have over 800 people blocked. I don't argue with them. I don't fight with them. And that's another thing. If someone, like, say you're on an autistic rampage and someone says something snarky, just don't engage. It's real simple. Don't have that back and forth. I call it a pissing match. Doesn't really solve anything. You just, both your legs are wet because you know, you're peeing on each other. It doesn't help anything. And so my time on, I mean, I'm on the internet a lot.
Yeah.
I'm on Facebook a lot, and I don't have anyone attacking me because I done blocked them.
Right.
They're gone.
So the incident, I'm going to go ahead and share what happened to me because other people might have had similar or parallel. It was in a group, and you know which group, but we don't need to go there, like whose it was. And there was somebody in the group who was a parent of a child on the spectrum who was sharing with the group that she had decided to become an OT. Very, and
Yeah,
Jewish, what we call it pareve, like not milk, not meat, just get like vanilla, like nothing interesting. And so lots of people were like, oh, that's great, congratulations. And I went in and I said, that's amazing. As a speech therapist and an RDI consultant, I think I was just saying, I value OT so much. It's so wonderful that you're doing this for your child and for the world. The end.
right.
2 or 3 sentences. And then at that time I was doing Facebook Lives for my own like coaching business. And it was like maybe later that day or days later that somebody who had seen me in the group apparently like followed me. And we weren't friends on Facebook. I'm still not sure how Facebook works, but during my Facebook Live, they were saying, "You abuse children."
Oh,
And then I went back and I figured out how they found me. Like, and then somebody in the group said, "How can you announce here that you abuse children?" And I didn't even know what they were referring to. But apparently they had put one of the things that I'm trained in on their like red list, and they showed me the red list, which was the proof. And I'm like, but what do you understand this to be? And when they described what the specialization was, they clearly didn't understand what it was at all.
right.
So I tried. My husband said exactly what you said, like, but I tried to explain.
Don't even try. It's just not worth it. You're just screaming into the wind.
Yes.
I think everyone is on a different path. Here I am, I'm 51 years old. I have metastatic cancer. I am tired of being angry. Fighting doesn't help. Reaching out with love and acceptance for everyone is the only way to help parents and to help children. I can't see myself screaming and yelling and being cruel to a parent who is trying to figure this whole thing out. I mean, that's just, I can't do it, and I won't do it.
Have people like go into groups, and what most people are doing is what they're mostly told. And I'm a little afraid that people are seeing that that's a potential in our group, but most people are told to do ABA. And so that's what they're doing. Because that's what their experts are telling, the
It's
professional
the gold standard.
gold standard.
The gold standard.
Gold standard, and I'm still not clear on why, but
Because it actually works to a point.
well,
If you brainwash someone for long enough, you're going to get them to do what you want.
well, what it does is it builds on the existing strengths in autism. It builds static intelligence. It builds skills.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, it also weakens what you want to be strengthening, which
Right.
is the like the dynamic intelligence and the self-advocacy and
Right.
expressing your own voice. And that's where like the adults on the spectrum are angry about it, but then
I think that there's a lot of the ABA that leaks into the other therapies that they're afraid of. Where, yeah, you can have an OT, but are they using ABA ideas and ideals in their therapy?
well, that's hard. I mean, I have to tell you honestly, a lot of my training I think was based on ABA as a speech therapist. And I went to a school with a recognizable fancy name, and I was definitely encouraged to do. And I did. Right after my master's degree, I went for training in ABA. And at the time, I'm like, oh, this is fabulous. And it was fabulous for teaching skills. It's great for teaching the R sound. It's
Yeah.
teaching dynamic intelligence.
Right.
So,
And yeah, but that's, that's where the parents come in.
right.
That's why I think the parents are not understanding that they are their child's number one therapist.
Mm.
I mean, you can go to hours and hours a week of therapy, but unless it's happening in real life at home.
Right. And we're going to talk about that. We're definitely going to talk about that. But anything else about the internet, about just staying safe and healthy and staying on the internet, and sometimes just going off.
I do that. I'll drop off for a whole weekend sometimes just because I need to relax. Just be careful and be empathetic when you see people get angry. They're just like your children, how your autistic children have sensory overload and meltdown.
Right.
Autistic adults are still autistic.
Right.
It doesn't go away.
Right.
So a lot of that is what you're seeing is just the same stuff that you see in your own children, just coming out of an adult instead.
Yeah.
And don't engage. Don't argue. Just don't engage. Don't argue.
Well, and that's actually, you know what, let's circle back to expert mind, because I think both of us are pulling towards the parents part of the conversation, and we'll come back to expert mind. But that's actually a lot of, like, in the early days of when I'm with a new family with coaching, a lot of what I'm passing over to the families. Like, when you see the meltdown, don't get caught in the tailspin. Don't add your
Mm.
I'm,
No, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
exactly. Don't add your energy to the tailspin. Pull out, and it's hard.
Disengage. Yeah,
Disengage, and that in itself diffuses it.
yeah.
And if the habit has been to, like, get triggered by the trigger and then start triggering each
Mhm.
other, just as
Right.
a lot of times the kid will be like, Daddy just
Quit-
did something different.
You're not arguing with me.
Like, and then it becomes, I'm just here to keep you safe.
Right. Yeah.
It might take a while.
I have to do a lot of that. Um, there's people that have attacked me, autistic grandma. And you know what I did in response? Nothing, nothing. Someone said, I'm not going to name who, but they said I was part of the autistic elite online. And I'm like, is that some kind of club I didn't know I was in?
The
And
autistic.
so the
That's
autistic elite. Yeah. And so instead of
like you're actually
lashing back out and making a big mean post about it, I just blocked them and went on with my life. You know, people hate that,
right.
but
Right.
they
Like
but
this,
they'll move on to somebody else. You know.
well, that's another thing, like, I talk about with parents a lot is I have a family that I worked with last year, and the parents are about my age. I'm in my early 40s. And we used to call it, this is your dance space, this is my dance space.
Right. Exactly.
Party dancing. I'm like, yeah, they got all of my, like, music and movie quotes and everything. But, like, that's a lot of co-regulation. It's just like holding your own space and showing that as an example.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and so this is something in my family, and we don't have autism diagnosis. We've got other stuff going on. But we've always lived in homes that don't have a lock on the master bedroom. That's so we've had to, like, I think it's trained us that we have to set the boundary. Like, you don't come in before 7 a.m.
And you knock. Right.
And then if
You
we
get to busting in.
knock and walk in, it's like you knock, and when but, like, boundaries is a big thing.
Boundaries is a big thing, and people suffer from not putting up boundaries. And I try, especially in the autistic community, I try to help people understand that you don't have to engage with everyone. Everyone is not going to like you. Everyone is not going to get you. And fretting over it will only create this
Right.
anxiety inside you that you don't have time for. Right? There's only so many minutes in a day.
Right. And especially, like, if you're an autistic adult or a parent of an autistic child or adult, like, it's like you have less energy to spare even than the average person who has no energy. Like, yeah, that's great. Okay, Melanie, I'm sure this is the first of many interviews I'll do with you because it's so much fun to talk.
Thank you. Thank
So,
you.
where can folks find you and the resources?
I am on Facebook. My handle is Autistic Grandma. I have a meme depository on Instagram.
It sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's all I do on Instagram. It's just I'll post all my memes there. But
Oh,
most of my work is done on Facebook.
yeah.
I'm not on. I mean, I think I have a Twitter, but I don't use it.
Oh, and Etsy.
Oh yeah, I have an Etsy. I haven't really been manning, but I started an Etsy to try and maybe sell some of my crafts to just get money back to buy more crafts.
Right.
I'm not really trying to make money on it. But yeah, you could check that out. It's Autistic Grandma on Etsy.
To support your habit.
Yeah, you gotta support this. Yarn's not free.
No, not.
Yarn's expensive right now too.
Yeah. Okay, so Melanie, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.